Am I seeing people appear in the chat? No, I'm just going to start.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it come in. Oh, there I'm seeing participants roll in. Awesome.
Yeah, there's about 21 people.
Yeah, fantastic. Welcome everyone. Firstly, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. I know if you've been working today or studying or doing anything really, joining a webinar at 6 p.m. on a Thursday night, it's a bit of an ask. So I really appreciate everyone joining us today. And I just want to welcome everyone to the event. So this is Decoding Devops. So thanks for giving us the privilege of occupying your precious Thursday evening. What we're going to be talking about today is really the unknown quantity that is DevOps, talking about what DevOps is and what it means to me and what it means to everyone here, really. So for me, DevOps is, well, I think there are as many definitions of DevOps out there as there are people working in DevOps. But for me, DevOps is about that point where development and operations intersect. And we'll discuss more how that is and what that means to everyone through the course of this evening. So we've got a fantastic set of panelists tonight. So I'll just introduce. Bill, I don't think we have here just yet. Unfortunately, Bill's having some technical difficulties, but we have Paul. If you could just wave, I'll get everyone to introduce themselves in a second. Thanks, Paul. Cynthia. Thank you, and Patrick. Awesome. So I'll ask you guys and hopefully Bill, if you can join us to introduce yourselves in a moment. But first, I'll pass over to Dallas, one of the enrollment advisors at Coder Academy, and he's going to say a few words about DevOps and about just some housekeeping as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, Alex. So yeah, once again, my name's Dallas. I'm one of the enrollment advisors at Coder Academy. I basically help people get into the right boot camp. And I guess that's what we're in the business of, like sort of making boot camps and delivering them and getting students into the industry. So yeah, what I'll say as far as housekeeping goes, you may have discovered the chat button and you've got the chat screen opens, which is fantastic. And a few of you have actually changed across to all panelists and attendees, which is fantastic. So those who actually sort of haven't said hello yet, feel free to do so. And also you might see an option there that says to all panelists. Do us a favor and just change that to all panelists and attendees. Unfortunately, something that we can't make happen automatically, but just so that everyone can sort of see all your questions and everyone's going to see all of our answers as well. So as far as using the chat sort of tonight, if you can throw any of your questions into the chat, whether it's about the coding bootcamps that I'm going to talk about in a moment, or whether it's questions specifically for the panelists. And what we'll do is, we'll sort of like, get the panelists to introduce themselves and have a bit of a chat and get some questions for them. And if you have some questions specifically for them, we might be able to sort of touch on them as we're going through. But don't worry, the bulk of the questions will be answered sort of at the end. We'll have a bit of a time for everyone to sort of jump in and just have a bit of a chat. So with that, I'll go ahead and sort of start the presentation just to sort of discuss the CodeClad and Cyber Bootcamp that we are starting in May. Cool. So become a tech triple threat in CodeClad and Cyber. So Australia's only accredited bootcamp with a focus on DevOps. So essentially our bootcamp, it teaches you to become a proficient backend developer, teaches you about cloud technology, DevOps, and also the fundamentals of cybersecurity, which all sort of like, I guess, make up DevOps or even DevSecOps these days. So the coded difference, we are the most loved Australian coding bootcamp provider currently. We're the only higher education accredited coded bootcamp that's focusing on DevOps currently, which is fantastic for those of you playing at home. That helps with government loans, things like fee help and HEX. And we actually are an AWS partner, and there are benefits that come along with that as well. We'll talk a little bit about that momentarily too. After completion of the CodeClad and Cyber Bootcamp, there is a 4-week optional internship for you to participate in. Basically, there's a few sort of things to juggle as far as eligibility criteria. But if you're really keen to chat more, you can always discuss these things with the enrollment team, such as myself and another guy called Brendan currently. And all of our educators are directly from industry, right? They've always got things to bring to the table. They're here to sort of like, help the next level of developers jump into the game. And occasionally they do leave to get back to industry as well. We try to stay at the pointy end of tech, and this is the way to do it. And the bootcamp goes for 10 months, if you just saw that too. So why study DevOps? So on LinkedIn, they declared Devops Engineer one of the most recruited roles in 2018. Okay, it's in demand. DevOps is the top skill gap of IT businesses in New South Wales and Victoria. There is massive job growth, so just under 25% projected growth for DevOps engineers over the next 5 years, with an average salary of 130K. So obviously that's the average. It starts off at somewhere, I'd say between say 70 and 80K, but with an average of 130, it goes up a fair way as well. So some job outcomes, back-end development, a developer / engineer, DevOps engineer, DevSecOps, as I mentioned before, which is DevOps with a little bit more sprinkling of security in there too, and also cloud engineer. So yeah, like all these things really tie into sort of like DevOps and how it works. But we're going to speak a little bit more about DevOps and how it sort of works and what it really is soon enough. Sorry, my mouse is being a clown. Cool. So we also have we also have a diversity in tech scholarship that's available for students. So we have like one scholarship available per intake. So essentially, as long as you speak to us and you apply for the scholarship and basically show us that you're a diverse person somehow. It could be religion, it could be coming from a certain industry. Like basically just talk to us about how you're going to change tech and how you're diverse. And you can basically get the bootcamp for half price. A bit of a term breakdown, okay? So there's 4 terms over the 10 months. The first term, you're going to build a portfolio website where you can essentially showcase sort of work that you've done so far. It's perfect as one of the first assessments as well, because you can build on it as you're going through the bootcamp, and you can also add content that you've sort of created later down the track in there too. It's perfect for showing potential employers. We'll also be touching on a terminal application, which will be written in Python as well. If you don't know what a terminal application is, that's totally fine. It's something that we will talk about. I'm not going to get too hung up in some technical jargon here just at the moment. And term 2, we'll be touching further on Python and creating a more sophisticated terminal application. Term 3, we're focusing on databases and backend applications. Students will continue to finesse their skills using Python and explore AWS cloud architecture. And term 4, students will build a full stack web application using Python. You'll also continue with AWS cloud architecture and things like Docker and Kubernetes, which I'm not going to get into right now either if you're not quite sure. But that's always fun technology to learn about. Cool. So the process for application is essentially you can go ahead and apply on our website, or if you want to speak to us, just get in touch. My details will be up soon. We'll then go through an admissions interview with the academic team. It's nothing, scary. It's more just to make sure you're a good fit for Coder Academy, and Coder Academy is a good fit for you because we're all about culture and we want to have a good one. And then after that, you'll be sent an enrollment link. You go ahead and enroll, and then you start your journey. So go ahead and apply now. And these are a couple of the course advisors. I'm the guy with the mustache over there. So I am in Brisbane, and Brendan, who couldn't be with us tonight, is actually in Sydney. But to be honest, you can speak to either one of us because this bootcamp is actually delivered entirely virtually online. It goes from 10 months. It starts on the 13th of May, I believe. And the dates are actually, so the class times are actually Thursday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you can speak to any one of us really in regards to the bootcamp. I am missing a slide here, so just bear with me for a moment. There it is. I skipped it earlier. Sorry about that. So there's the intake dates, and the duration is it's 10 months, so 38 weeks, delivered virtually through Canvas. Timetable is Thursday to Saturday. Qualifications is a higher education diploma of IT. Now, touching on that as well, if you decide to, I mean, we want you to complete our bootcamp, do an internship, and then break into the industry directly. But if you do want to continue on and maybe finish a degree in computer science, you can move on to university and get RPL for that as well. So there are a lot of cases where students move in to a degree as a second year and get the first year, RPL. And then fee help is available for citizens, the price being just shy of $20,000 in total. It's payable in 4 installments.
I'm trying to do something here.
Whoa. It's available, payable in 4 installments, but fee help is available to Australian citizens the whole way through. And down the bottom there, I was talking about the AWS certification. So prepare for AWS Cloud Practitioner's exam at a 50% discount fee, which is normally $100 US. Cool. And that's pretty much it from me, Alex. So I'll throw it back over to you and I'll start sort of monitoring the chat, guys. So I'll do my best to answer the questions that have come through.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dallas. That was great. So in my haste to introduce all of our wonderful speakers, I forgot to introduce myself. So I'll just say a couple of words. My name's Alex Boulderstone. I am a course coordinator at Coder Academy. I'm based in Melbourne. So we've got Melbourne and Brisbane holding it down here today. But that's enough from me. That's all I really wanted to say. If you're curious as to why I'm here talking about this thing. So I'm going to ask the speakers to introduce themselves. Starting with Bill. Yes, Bill is here. Fantastic. So Bill, if you could just introduce yourself and maybe just speak about what your career trajectory has looked like in the last 5 to 10 years.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill. I'm currently the DevOps specialist for a small startup on the Northern Beaches in Sydney. Look, for the last 10 years, I think it would be easy to say that I've pretty much started as a system admin in the Unix world. And moved gradually through to doing a lot of cloud and virtualization and online storage, which seemed to gel into doing the DevOps world. My specialty is cybersecurity. I went and studied a master's in cybersecurity to keep myself amused. I started out running cables for Telstra all those years ago. And my main motivation to getting to sit at a desk was to stop going under houses and in roofs and into pits. So whatever motivates you, find something you like doing.
That's great advice. I'll pass over to Paul.
Hey everyone, thanks Alex. To continue on with what Bill said, what is it that motivates you? And I think when I started off my, finishing off like my high school studies, I was thinking, I think working in like this IT space is kind of a bit like nerdy, bit geeky. I'm not sure whether I want to do that. So instead I chose like a year of, studying to be an accountant. So even worse. After 6 months of that, I realized that wasn't for me. I did finish off that first year, and I did those studies, and that was enjoyable. But I made the switch across to computer science. So that's just like a brief intro of like what I decided to study and where I kicked off from. But yeah, I'm Paul Kukiel. I'm a solution architect at AWS. I've been at AWS now for getting on to a year. Really early in the days, if we are going to like really think about what DevOps is, and that word is newish. My first jobs that I was doing were, I was a software engineer, I was a developer, I was writing code, but we had to manage the servers ourselves. We were at a smallish startup, and that meant literally going into the data centers, installing those racks, running the cables, making Cat5 cables so everything was looking really neat. So DevOps is not necessarily just a new thing. The way we approach it and the way we think about it and the way we deal with it now is fundamentally different. But DevOps really has been around for a very, very long time. But as we'll go through that today, we'll find out that it's, the DevOps role, or that the ops part of the DevOps role is not necessarily dealing with the hardware anymore, not necessarily dealing with the cables. You're doing that with code, and you're building out that same infrastructure with code. So my day-to-day is working with, large enterprise customers, and all sorts of different customers actually at AWS where they've got challenges or architecture designs they want to go through. But prior to that, I've probably spent the last 15 years writing and building software for big banks, online wagering. So BetEasy, I worked there, real estate industry, like a bunch of different things. And yeah, pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'll pass over to Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia, and I started my career as a Java developer for an undisclosed amount of years. And after that, I was hired as a Java developer on a team that turns out it was a DevOps team. I had no idea what was DevOps. I had no idea what was Puppet. It was before Docker. It was 10 years ago, and that company was Atlassian. And I fell in love with the whole thing. I fell in love with Puppet. I said, what? You don't have just a stage into machines? I can create machines using code? Why haven't I done that to start with? And I really love the cultural part of it, like the post-production. And I just thought, yes, that's where I want to be. This thing about being a developer is not my thing anymore. And since then, I passed through a few companies. I work a little bit at Taro that some people might actually have worked. Right now, I'm at Resi. I am a lead site reliability engineer. It's just a flavor of DevOps or ops kind of role. And it's a booking software company. We actually have a reasonably market share in New Zealand and Australia. So if you've been a supplier for booking or a tool or something, an experience, you might actually have used our software. So that is my career.
Thank you so much. And finally, I'll pass over to Patrick.
Thank you, Alex. Much like everyone else, I kind of started doing something else. When I graduated high school, probably a few more years ago than Cynthia, I had an opportunity to go to university, and I was studying computer science, and I realized there was one thing I knew I did not want to be, which was a programmer. I'm really bad at it. I just cannot think in the paradigm that programming required. So instead I became a systems administrator, followed sort of the same kind of path that Bill did without going through the detour of cabling. Realized about 10 years ago that I didn't like repeating myself. So I started automating things. Spent 2 years building a very precarious automation capability in shell script because I refused to learn how to program. And then I discovered Puppet, which is an automation framework. And I loved Puppet so much that I learned everything I could about it. I quit my job. Yes, Paul, and now I'm a programmer. Or more, I'll get to that. I quit my job and I went and worked for Puppet. And I spent 2 years working for Puppet, proselytizing the good news about Puppet and DevOps to the world, which was fantastic. Now I've gone out too far out the other side, and I now just draw on whiteboards and get my team to actually do all the things that I ask them to do. So all of those buzzwords on the slide earlier about Python, CSS, and Kubernetes, I can definitely spell most of those things, but probably don't want me being in charge of doing them. I am now, I work at the University of Technology, where if you complete this, you may consider going to afterwards. There we go. I think I've fulfilled that requirement to plug it. Where I'm in charge of a migration. So my specialty is moving old things into the cloud, into modern frameworks. So I'm currently working on a massive piece of work there at the university. And when I finish that, I will go and find someone else who has a really old setup and help them move it off into the cloud. I'm not a pointy head boss, Bill. I don't have any hair. I used to be Bill's boss. I miss those days when I could just tell him to be quiet.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Patrick. I can see one thing that really unites all of you is just how much passion you have for whatever it is you're doing right now. And that's really amazing to see. I've heard a little bit about this from a couple of you, and we've kind of approached this subject naturally on its own, but I'm going to throw this one out to everyone. In a single sentence or short paragraph, what is DevOps?
DevOps is the lazy person's way of doing IT. You never do the same thing twice. You automate everything because you don't want to do it again.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it up, right? Like you're combining the skills that are required, like as a developer, as a programmer, with what's required to be able to host and operate and run that service. Combining those two things together is DevOps. You develop it and then you operationalize it and you look after it.
I really like to think that DevOps is kind of the second wave of Agile, because the first one, people talk about the development cycle, and it was done by the time that it was like deployed, like passed all the tests. And then I really like the way DevOps said, no, it's not done until it's actually production, and actually after that, and everyone has to take care of that. So it kind of increased, or a developer is not more, I committed, it's great, someone else's problem. You actually had to get it running and you're responsible for that. So I think that's pretty.
I think I'll just iterate what Bill said. For me, DevOps is putting yourself out of a job every single day, because you should not come to work tomorrow and have to do the same thing.
Hard to argue with that. Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. It's great to see a variety of opinions, but they're all kind of converging into a similar kind of industry. One thing we talk about a lot at Coder Academy is this idea of a T-shaped individual. And I think this sort of speaks to what Cynthia was saying. It's now everyone's everyone needs to be involved in the getting stuff into production side as well, a developer's responsibility. And while you might have a lot of depth of knowledge in development or programming, you've got a breadth of knowledge in these other areas like operations and hosting and whatever it may be. That being said, the next question I have for the group is, can you talk through a day in the life of a DevOps engineer?
Well, maybe I'll kick off on this one.
Sure.
Like we've all sort of talked about it, and we all have come from different backgrounds, and a DevOps engineer role can be, I would say, can be significantly different depending on the organization that you're working in. So if you were to work within a smaller organization, so when I've worked in smaller organizations, there was a lot more ownership on most people in the team being across most of the things. So that's just the way you needed to be. And that spread of knowledge was it had to be pushed out that way because you didn't have a larger team that you could rely on, or you didn't necessarily have the time to be able to be like a super specialist in one area or repeat yourself to perfect some area really, really well. So when you're in a smaller organization, that role is, well, you're building your code and you're making sure that it works properly, or your manual testers are happy, your automation testers are happy. But then, as I think it was Cinta said earlier, you don't just chuck it to somebody else and say, well, there you go, like it worked on my machine, like it's your problem. Your role is to then decide, well, how do we go ahead and deploy that to production? Do I need to build like a pipeline? What are the steps in that pipeline? I want to make sure that when I've committed my code into a certain branch and then I'm going to do a pull request or a merge into like a develop branch, that's going to kick up a couple of build steps. Those build steps, and you have a wide range of decisions around that. Might be check out that code and send it off to a build agent. Jenkins is one that's really common in the industry. That'll build that package and put it all together, and then you've got something that's built, and you say, oh, well, I need to put that somewhere, so I need to automate a piece of my pipeline. It's going to go ahead and put that somewhere and store that. And then you say, well, I've built my application. What do I need to do now? Well, I want to put it into production. And so, if we go back to, let's just say, to make it easy, someone's got some servers, right? So we're setting up a server, and each time we want to set up that server, we want to deploy some code set. Like if I go back, 10, 12 years or 15 years ago, when we had applications ready, we would log into that server, we would FTP across the files, we might unzip those files and put them somewhere, and then stop the service, move the files into the right direction, clean out the old ones, restart the service and set it back up again. Now, what we really want to do is have that done automatically, like automate ourselves out of the job. And what that might be as a DevOps engineer is, that seems like a lot of work, and that's going to keep my server running for a long time. Over time, it's going to be not so happy about that. What I'll do is I'll prepare all of this work, then I'm going to provision a brand new server. I'm going to load that code in. And then once that server is up and ready, I'm going to cut over the old server and swap in the new server and let that go forward. So that might be like a task that somebody's going to do. And, you know, it seems like a lot of this would be like really easy, but, you know, it takes time. It takes time to do that. We write tests and we write, you know, unit tests for code. So you can also write unit tests for any of the automation languages that you're using. And so, you know, your job is about like writing scripts, code, programs, whatever you want to call them, to be able to automate taking your code as part of your code, building that, testing it, make sure it's working properly, deploying in production, and building the infrastructure that could be required to deploy in production, and stitching that all together so that the very next time that somebody else is ready to you know, make a change, or, you know, change the font color of a, you know, an icon or something in production, they can make a commit into the repo. As long as all the tests pass, someone can click a button, or if you're using CI/CD or a full CD pipeline, as long as everything passed, that can just automatically go to production, and that's the way it is. You know, just to quickly go back on that, you'd say, well, if I've done that once, what's the job of the DevOps engineer? Like, what am I going to do every day? Like, surely you build the pipeline once. Anybody that's ever worked in software or built any sort of application knows that tomorrow someone is going to sell some new thing that's going to require some change is to your code, your application, some new piece of infrastructure, or some new expansion. It will never, ever tire of building new things.
Thank you. That was a very in-depth and full answer. I really appreciate that. Did anyone else have anything to add?
I recently, a new person joined the product team, and the manager of product team presented myself as a person who creates these spines and backbones of the application. And I thought it was very poetic, because in some way we are building all the, you know, the base infrastructure, and we're building all the pipes that lead to production and helping people deploy to production. So a fair bit of our work is helping people deploy to production, or building the base infrastructure and updating this base infrastructure to keep with the demands and the new requirements that come up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is such an integral role in any organization. Cool. We might move on unless Bill or Patrick had anything really important they wanted to add. Nope. Great.
thing I'd probably
Cool.
add is, being a DevOps engineer, you have to have a really good base core set of skills, and then you have to apply them without fear or favor to new technology and things like that. We don't get much time to specialize in anything, but we have to be good at everything.
Yeah.
Actually, on that, sorry, I do have something on that now. It's also sometimes we need to know when to stop using a piece of technology. And it might be a piece of technology we've used for 5 years, or it might be a piece of technology we've used for 5 minutes. But we do have to make those hard calls sometimes, because we just realize actually this is not going to, it's not going to help us in the short to medium term. Maybe it's a strategic thing we need to look at, but today, it's not the time for me to learn Kubernetes today. Maybe Kubernetes is a project. Today, I'll just use Docker. And if you don't know what those words mean, it doesn't matter, but it's the difference between using a brick to hold a door open and building a whole new house to hold your door open.
Great analogy. And yeah, I think that's important too. A lot of those decisions around technology and what to use and what not to use are such a core part of your jobs. On that note, at Coder Academy in our CCC bootcamp, we do teach Python. So why learn Python for DevOps? And what would the benefits be of having Python knowledge in the current DevOps climate?
Speaking as the non-programmer on the panel, Python's easy enough to understand. It's a good language to get started with. It really is. The learning curve is nowhere near as high as learning something like C or Java. And it's a really flexible language. It can do a lot of things. Everybody has their favorites, and really there's no right or wrong answer about what your favorite is. But Python is the go-to language I recommend anyone who's starting out programming. I say go and have a look at Python first before you try anything else. If you're looking at sort of DevOps, automation, general purpose programming language.
I also think that Python is probably, but first, Python is 10 times better than Bash. We can all agree that Bash should not be used for something that more than 50 lines, and we end up committing that crime times and times again. But Python is extremely comprehensive on, the community is very, very comprehensive and very inclusive. I think it's the only community that I know that a lot of people that are in this community do not identify as developers. You have data scientists that use it as a tool, system admin that uses it as a tool, and the core developers in the community thinks that this is important. These people that are not, their job is not really being developers. I do recommend for everyone that is learning, we do have a conference in September. It's going to be extremely online again in September. It's called pycon.au. It's brilliant, and it's something that it doesn't matter how much you use Python, you always learn something new. So if there is one programming language that you should know for scripting in ops, it'll be Python. Most of the toolings are done in Python, or scripts are hacked in Python, or is Python calling Bash calling Python. So please, yes, that is the best tool for sure to learn.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate like how big Python has become in the last few years. Like the demand is really high all over the place. You know, as anybody who's going through like one of the Coder Academy boot camps, and I've like, you know, worked with a couple of people from Coder Academy, you know, you'll find, and people ask me this question like, oh, well, you learned Ruby. Am I going to learn that? I want to get a Ruby job. And I say basically to most people, no matter what you learned in your studies, that is not the language you'll be using on your day-to-day role. However, Python is, you will definitely use it. Like even if you don't use it as your primary programming language of that role, somewhere you'll be using it, and somewhere along your career you'll be using it. And it's especially huge in data science at the moment as well. So like anybody who's thinking of like looking or exploring that area, and this is like a really largely untapped area, like all the data science and analytics that are expected of you know developers to do. It's a really good language to get up and go with, and plenty of future in it.
Just an anecdote about that, how easy it is to use Python and how comprehensive it is. I was in a hackathon a few years ago looking at legal technology, so RegTech. And we had to come up with a prototype to do sentiment analysis on documents to understand when laws had changed and what the changes meant and what that effect might be on legal decisions and precedent. My team put together a demo with 16 lines of Python code using some modules and libraries that other people had written. So I personally wrote 16 lines of code, and we won the hackathon with the best demo and the best technology. Behind our 16 lines of code, there were 1 million lines of code that actually did the AI smart bit. We just leveraged it because someone else had already done all the hard work. So definitely something. Even, and to be clear, I did an MBA. I was doing a master's in business at the time. So I'm not a programmer, never have been. And even then I was able to build a product that a law firm was prepared to invest in, which is crazy when you think about it.
Python has an advantage that it's kind of like it's a really good language that can go from a written word to written code in your whole development cycle, because you can follow it, but you can write down, if this does that, then do this other thing. And then in an hour's time, if you've never had any Python experience but you've got web access, you've developed code which you directly can look back at where you started from and go, okay, I see where that went. And you can see what everything did. And that's not to disparage some of the other languages like C and stuff like that, but I do find sometimes when you read them, it's like chicken scratchings on paper and compared to where you started from. So it's a good way it's a good learning language which will give you a base experience in that knowledge and that logic thinking and the procedural thinking of programming to take to other languages, and then you can suffer through them.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. That was, once again, really thoughtful and great insight on why Python particularly in DevOps, but also just why in general. This has kind of been touched on a little bit in the chat, and it's I mean, part of our focus in general at Coder Academy. But the question to the panel is, how does a person without tech or a web development background or industry experience break into a career, particularly in DevOps?
Look, the one thing I'll say is be prepared to start at the bottom. There's no shortcuts in this, no shortcuts in what we do. Like somebody walking in and seeing me work on a day-to-day might think, hey, he's just clicking buttons and poking servers in somebody else's data center. But behind that is decades of, like I said before, I've crawled under houses. I've also, done the late night disaster recovery drills. I've been the person that typed in 50 pages of code because the senior didn't want to do it. But it all leads to the skill level and the, I keep harping back on it. I don't think I can pick the right words, but it's kind of like you just get a sense of the work that you're doing and the technology you're working with. And you may not know it, but you can get the concepts and you can apply them to anything new that comes to you. And you have the confidence to go, hang on, I understand what I think it's trying to do. Let me look it up. So somebody that says, I want to do DevOps and then wants to start doing the sit at a desk with your feet up and punch in servers, you've got to start at the bottom where you don't have that base skill set. So when something does go wrong, you'll be the one running around with your hair on fire, where somebody who has started at the bottom knows, okay, I can physically do that. I can go and type this other thing in, or I can go see this guy and say, hey, you need to change your code. So coming from another skill or another industry, it's all experience built to your confidence level, but you still have to start somewhere at the bottom and develop the code experience and the technology experience.
Sorry, Paul, you go. You look like you're about to start something big.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I know 2 ex-Coder Academy students that have come off at the back of theirs and they've taken internships. So like really to Bill's point, like you do have to start at the bottom, and you will have absolutely no clue what you're doing when you work into that first job. So getting out there, meeting people, getting into an internship is like really, really important. And I know that at the start, I think it was it Dallas was talking about building out that portfolio. I know for a fact with those students that, like, I was somewhat influential because I knew, some people that I was helping them, recommend across to. Having that portfolio and have actually built hands-on things is going to like go a mile for you. Like you need to be able to build these things. You need to know how to talk about it and how to do it. You can study and recite Kubernetes, whatever else you want to say. But the moment you get into the room and someone says, okay, like, tell me the command to do this, or can you draw on the whiteboard how this is supposed to look, what you're designing, you can fall over there. So starting at the bottom and building your own infrastructure and building your own portfolio and doing the hard work there is incredibly important.
I recently, or a few years ago now, helped my sister with a career change. I say career change, from stay-at-home mum to a career. So in her, let's say, mid-30s, unfortunately at the time, this sort of boot camp was not available. There was only sort of straight programmer boot camps, and she didn't really want to do that. But again, it was about, in her case, she went to TAFE, she got a certificate, but at the same time, she spent every night practicing Python because I told her to. And one time in her life, she listened to me. So it's a good start. Younger sister, of course. But it was really she just kept going at it and kept trying. And then she got an interview. And in all fairness, I pointed her to the interview. It was a connection I had on LinkedIn advertising the role. I literally met this person for 2 minutes at a conference 4 years ago. I just sent him a message saying, look, my sister's trying to get started. She's literally got nothing because she's been a stay-at-home mum. Can you just give her the interview? She got the job. She got the job. I didn't get her the job. She got the job. And within 2 years, she's now kind of been, prepared for management and leadership roles, because turns out raising 2 girls gives you an awful lot of experience in how to manage people and do all the things that a manager's meant to do. So it doesn't matter what your experience is or where it comes from, you'll be able to use it in various ways, and you'll be able to bring new perspectives. If even like Bill and I are largely the same, but when we sit down and work out a problem, we come from very different perspectives on how to do it. And that's more important, because that's actually how we get better solutions, instead of the noisiest person in the room, which is, I'll be honest, usually me, giving their opinion and everyone else being too scared to say anything. Have lots of different opinions, have a conversation about it, bring your previous experience. When I was a industrial chemist, or when I was a cable monkey crawling under a house, this is how I solve this problem. You never know when it's going to be valuable. Don't hide it.
The one thing I'd like to add is the confidence and the experience to say, I don't know, is incredibly important. Too many people try and bluff their way through it, and you just can't do that anymore. You have to be don't be afraid to say, I don't know. But going on the flip side of that is you can't just say, I don't know, and walk away and hope someone else fixes it. You've got to say, I don't know, but here is my thinking, and I will go check here, here, and here. What do you think? Never try and bluff your way through, because it takes 3 to 4 times longer to fix those kind of mistakes.
Yeah, great insight. Did anyone else have anything to add to that? No? Awesome. Awesome. All right, thank you. So I guess this kind of leads into my next question, which is about the skills gap. So sort of Seek is predicting that over the next 5 years, projected growth in the job area that is DevOps engineering or DevOps or that kind of field is going to be 24%. And it's been identified as the #1 skills gap by a number of tech companies. So what approach is the industry taking to train people to fill this skills gap? And how important is it to give people hands-on experience as they're upskilling from a position within an organization into a DevOps role?
I guess, when we say DevOps, we're very hands-off, where everything's code, but when you boil it down, it's essentially a computer in someone else's data center. So the skills of a system administrator or a programmer still apply, but you're essentially either getting things done via code, or somebody else is literally in another data center doing it for you, if it's physically pulling data sources in and out and stuff like that. So the industry is kind of lacking in the focus towards dedicated kind of a DevOps skill set, but I think that's because no one's actually sat down and defined what is the perfect DevOps engineer and what is the skill set of a DevOps engineer. Like, for the recently, I changed jobs at 6 months ago now, and I'm the first DevOps engineer the company ever had, and they didn't know what was expected. They asked a lot of system administration questions at the interview. They asked lots of coding questions, but that's not really the nuts and bolts of DevOps, but it's all part of it. Going with that is DevOps people do a lot of paperwork and a lot of writing and things like that. So there is a huge range of skills. So at the moment, your skill set is dependent on what you can build yourself, because there's, apart from this bootcamp and the rare one you'll find online that are usually no good, you've got to kind of build your own DevOps brand, and you're selling yourself and you're selling yourself to people that don't really know what they want to buy. They need a car, but you've got to tell them they need 4 wheels, doors, windows, things like that, and that you can provide them all. Otherwise, they're going to get 4 people that lift them up and carry them on a chair, and they don't know any different. So yeah, the industry kind of lacks, but the training's there, but it's not bundled together.
It's really diverse. Like every organization wants something different. You could go, like I said, I came from the bank, and they'll have specific DevOps engineers that are saying, we want you to specialize in Kubernetes. Like, you need to know Kubernetes inside and out, and that's what's going to be your day role. Like, it's a newish technology, so you're not going to get like a lot of people that do that, but people are familiar with the technology, that have a history in the past, so you get the opportunity to go ahead and work in that area. But it's like Bill said, that they want a DevOps engineer, which is effectively to be able to control, build, and manage, and help work with teams to build infrastructure out for what they need to do. And whether that is on a certain certain cloud provider maybe, or a certain technology stack, or whatever that might be, or a specific language. I know Patrick mentioned before, like Puppet. So there's Puppet, there's Ansible, there's CloudFormation, there's CDK, there's Terraform. There's a million different ways to do that. So you can't just specialize and say, well, you can actually. You could specialize and say, that's what I'm going to do, but you're probably going to limit some of the role opportunities that you're going to go to. So you have to have like a good general idea. Then you take the role and, okay, sure, I need to learn Terraform at this role, or I need to learn CDK or something. Then you go ahead and you learn that, but the principles, the underlying principles are the same across them.
And one thing that I think it's important is that a couple of years ago, kind of everyone called Devops Engineer, or like most people, or they were other operators in DevOps. And now we kind of have sub-specializations inside it. So if you see things like, build engineer, or you have a cloud infrastructure engineer, sometimes you have people that are more specialized or less specialized, depending on where you are. And they are kind of come from the same root, but they kind of have slightly different skills or slightly different expectations of that role. The same way that you have a front-end developer that might be different position of a back-end developer.
A lot of the consulting I do to organizations on these big, massive changes of moving from the old way to the new way, or from data center to a cloud, it's almost all about how are you taking your people on the journey? How are you driving the change? Paul just put a link into some books he recommends. I literally used to carry those very books and many more of the same sort of books to every customer I ever went to. The first thing I'd do is give them books and say, read these books. I'll come back when you have questions. And it got me an awful lot of consulting business. I've met the authors many times and I haven't had to give them a kickback yet, which is great. But it is true. It's not just for technology. From an organizational perspective, it's all about people. On my desk at the moment, I have a bookshelf. I keep a small library in the office. It's got maybe 25 books on it. 2 of them are about technology. 23 of them are about people and culture and organizations and training and all those other things that we need to solve. You don't necessarily have to solve all of them, but the organizations do. And a lot of them are now looking at doing in-house training. Some of them, like NAB recently, I think it was NAB recently talked, maybe ANZ, and it doesn't matter. Everybody's going to do the Amazon crowd practitioner training, just for basic level, learn what all the product names are and have a rough idea of what they do. That's great. That's a brilliant initiative. But what are they going to do after that? How are they going to help people who say, I really want to learn about this big data thing on AWS? How do they go down that rabbit hole? How do they make time for it? And I'm a big believer in giving my staff a lot of time to do that sort of training. One advantage of working at a university is education's kind of our thing. So nobody can tell me it's a bad thing to let my staff train. But sometimes when you're working on a project or at a bank or a telco, it's hard to get that time. And the good organizations will have it. And when you're going for those interviews and they say, do you have any questions for us? Ask them what they do internally. Do they run lunch and learn sessions? Do they encourage people to bring out new technologies and try them? Those are the sort of questions you want to find out, because that'll tell you if it's a fun place or if it's a boring, factory style IT shop.
Fantastic. Really, really great. Great call on a good question to ask in an interview. Personally, I couldn't work in an organization that didn't have some kind of learning culture. That being said, what would you say, and this is the whole panel, what would you say to people who think that maybe they don't have the math skills required to get into the industry, or people who think that creative or creative oriented people can't get into tech and coding industries?
Well, like if you think about creative people as somebody that's like going to play music or paint a picture, forget it. Like I cannot do that. I'm just horrendous at that. But I will say, and I knew this question was coming, and it resonated with me that like I express my own art in the code and the glorious things that I create and design. So my creativity comes out in a completely different way. So like that's my point on that.
I'll follow that one up. Yeah, I agree. My wife's an artist, and if she won't let me near a paintbrush because I'll stab myself in the eye, that kind of skill is not what I need. And she won't go near a mouse because she'll probably hang herself from the ceiling. So it's a different mindset to get things done. But I would harking back to the original question. It was a long, long time ago when I graduated high school, but I failed. My HSC was abysmal. I had given up. I didn't want to be there, got crappy marks. I never even went to uni till 10 or 11 years ago. But, I'm a DevOps specialist now, and I code and I run things, and I've You know, in my working career, I've traveled the world for the companies I've worked for, and I've done lots of high profile jobs and things like that. So I guess my message is you'd never let it hold you back. Like, I think if you have a passion for it and you know you have some deficiencies, like you're not very good at maths or something, you have to build up a basic skill set. But then you've also got to remember, we all carry phones and they've all got calculators in them now. So you build on your strengths and weaknesses, but you can't just sit back and say, well, I can't do maths, so I'm never going to use a computer. It's like, no, what am I lacking? What do I need? If I really want that job, I'm going to build myself up and take it. And it's like with DevOps, it's the majority of it is cloud-based. If you don't have any cloud experience, get some. You know, every cloud provider offers a free account for you to try with certain limits and things like that. I did a lot of recruiting a while ago, and I can honestly say people that came to us who didn't have any cloud experience professionally, but had done a course and then at home had done certain things and projects and stuff, they impressed me more than people that had just said, well, yeah, I tinkered with it. I know how to spell AWS. But you know, you get to see the people that really want to do things, and it's sometimes the deficiency can be fixed, but the passion can never be injected. So don't ever let anything hold you back. You can work on your deficiencies and you can fix those things.
I always find curious that IT people, like software people, are do not identify as creative. You have no idea how many workarounds we come up to solve things. It's like the hacks we go through to get through the loops and get things back working. We are very creative. We might not be artsy, most of us, but creative we are. And reality is that we don't need math skills. We need solving, debugging, and hacking skills to get gluing things together. But reality is that a lot of our work is kind of herding cats. We get to get everyone pointing to the same direction and do everything together and get things working, or get things in a way that people can actually use. And just because IT people talk a lot of jargon, it doesn't mean that all of us are smart. There's a lot of people that are not, regardless of how they say. So don't mistake just because someone is in software or in IT industry that they are smart. There is no correlation between those two things. And math skills, we don't use them. We use programming, we use logic, we use problem solving, but we have calculators. If you ask me how much, a multiplication, I have no idea anymore. And so I would actually invite everyone to identify as creative type, because we certainly are.
Everything everyone said. If you want to do data science, yes, you're probably going to need to be able to do some maths. Otherwise, probably not. And if you're good at it and you fall down that path, that's great. I know for a fact maths was one of the primary reasons why I did not want to do computer programming. I was sick of walking into the applied mathematics 101 class at uni and walking out feeling stupid. So I stopped going, which probably didn't help me get any smarter, but and absolutely. Right, we are very creative, and it's only because we've been told we're not creative that we think along those lines. So I don't think there's any one skill we need for any of these things. It always changes and varies, except Python. You've got to have Python.
Actually, when you think about it, you look at all the hobbies and outside interests that a lot of technical people have. They're very creative or very expressive. Yeah. Like I work with a lot of people that are into photography and painting and going camping and things like that. So we may not be considered the traditional creative at work, but it doesn't mean we're not creative. And yes, we are. So we are very creative when it comes to avoiding repetition.
And maths. Avoiding maths is also high on our list.
Once they introduced the alphabet to maths, they lost me.
Oh, awesome. Amazing insight from everyone once again. I agree with you all. I could talk all day about being creative and my previous background, but I'm not on the panel, so let's move on. I'm gonna do a couple of individual questions. So I'll start with Bill. So Bill, you've worked across a variety of large organizations. How has their conception of DevOps differed? And how has it changed over time in your experience in different organizations?
I got in on the ground level when DevOps was a twinkle in a system administrator's eyes. So I've seen it develop through a lot of companies where it's come from a data center and the floor upstairs to AWS or Azure or Google in God knows where. And along the way, there's been different evolutions of skill sets and evolutions of working processes that go with these things. Usually, I'd have to say management and the business processes lag behind the actual physical doing the work. So a lot of the time it's, hey, you've got to get these servers up and going and we're going to do this great thing called cloud. And it's up to the rest of the engineers and the traditional system administrators at the time to work out how to do it. And that how has flowed up through the business processes and become a kind of a staple. And I've come from large companies, like without name dropping, I did a lot of work for IBM, and they fought tooth and nail against DevOps because they had a big interest in data centers. But now they're big in DevOps. I worked for Telstra, same thing there. They have their own telephone exchanges. They don't want to have anything else to do with anybody else's. Now they're a big AWS, Azure place. So I think it became less of a novelty at the start, where it was seen as, how do we have computers without owning them? And now it's, how do we run our business with someone else's computers, and how can we save a ton of money and still get that flexibility that we need? And even today, like now I work for a startup, essentially there is no computers in the office except the laptops that everyone uses. Even our phone system is virtual. So we don't have anything. And from that startup, I started from day one saying, okay, we're not going to own anything. And once we get big enough requirements in our cloud, we'll get some DevOps people in. Once that happened, DevOps was there to take over things. So they started with a DevOps business plan instead of waiting for the business plan to catch up. So it's been I guess it's like giving birth, you know, that we started with a little kid and now we've got the teenage DevOps, and eventually it'll turn into old man DevOps and something else will come along. That's just what IT does.
Fantastic, thank you. And also, what do you recommend for new developers or developers new to their careers to focus on if they do want to move more towards DevOps?
Look, problem solving, definitely. Python, essential. I would also say to have a broad experience in a lot of different software packages and applications. And I don't mean becoming an expert in Photoshop or things like that. I mean, you download Jenkins and you run it and you go, yeah, that's pretty. I know which buttons to push, then you get rid of it. But to develop a certain comfort level with being able to say, yeah, show me something new. I can poke and prod it without being scared that I'm going to break something. And then I'll learn and be able to apply those skills. So I guess if I had to sum it up, if you want to get into DevOps, you've got to be able to think on your feet. You've got to be able to learn really fast, apply it, and not be scared to make mistakes. You fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. That's what you have to do.
Great advice, thank you. I'm going to move to Paul. So Paul, how important is an understanding of DevOps in a technical leadership role?
I think that this has probably had a bit of a change within the industry, like more recently, because in the past, and as I mentioned it, like we had servers, we had infrastructure that was there all the time. It wasn't really changing. Software wasn't changing as fast back then as it is now. Like now you're expected to be able to release fast. You'll be able to be like on top of what's going on. There's an expectation that people don't want to stay up till 11 o'clock and do the release at 11 o'clock at night anymore. And also, like when you're in leadership, like you have like, costs pushed down on you to say like, keep the costs down. Look at what you're doing with the infrastructure, keep the costs down. In the past we had those servers. If you wanted a dev server, it was just on all the time. You just bought it. So as a leader, you need to understand what it is that you're delivering back to your organization and effectively to your customers. So to your organization, keeping the costs down, to your organization and to your staff, giving them the freedom, the ability to operate and build the developer environments that they need to be able to build. For your customers, performance. So you've got the performance and scalability there. and also, you know, the ability to go ahead and reliably release new products, new code, new infrastructure, and not affect the customer experience. I think a lot of like what it comes down to is realizing that, you know, what DevOps is bringing to your organization is a better experience to your customer, even though they will be completely unaware of what is going on to those processes and what you're aiming to achieve for those customers as well. So it's not just shiny buttons all the time, but the overall experience that when you go to the website, it works and it works fast, and you don't have a time where at 10 o'clock at night, it doesn't work for whatever reason.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess that sort of leads into my next question, which is, what is something that each member of a team can do to contribute to better DevOps or better DevOps practices or culture within an organization?
Look, the last organization that I was at, which is National Australia Bank, and people are free to look up like NAB, Cloud Guild or Skills Guild. You know, if you're in a team, I feel that you should be sharing that knowledge back with your team. So when you have like a new idea or something that you're looking at, you should be able to go and share that back. For anybody that's gone through being a developer, there's a process called code review. Like all code review should be reviewed by somebody else within that team, like another person. There are automated solutions to help do that. And a code review process is something that's like really valuable. It toughens you up to get used to having some criticism back to what you're doing, because we all make mistakes and people will have better ideas, and sometimes their ideas are better, sometimes your ideas are better. But sharing that knowledge back with the team, if you've got something that's you've done, or you've saved some money, or you've built something that's really super reliable, or a component or some sort of wrapper that is something that's reusable for other teams, go ahead and share that, and don't be afraid to share that. And that might be not just within your direct team, but within your organization as a whole, or even back to the community. So like on the link that I posted earlier, there's a couple of like meetup groups. So getting back out in the community and giving something back to communities is really important as well. So I think, you know, each member, like within their team, even as an individual within a team, or as part of a larger team, or as an organization, or as a community as a whole, should understand that giving some of that back is really important.
Awesome. Yeah, great answer. One more question for you. How can new developers prepare to interview for a DevOps role?
I think when I said it earlier, like building that portfolio, and Bill talked about it as well, if people have watched a video and they can recite some words, you're going to trip over really, really quickly. You need to do the hands-on, you need to build some things out. Having a portfolio, and having a portfolio that's available on the internet where people can click on it and go through it. And that could be a YouTube video of you going ahead and doing that. Put as much as you can on like GitHub so people can look through your code. Look, I helped a company interview a developer for a specific role a few months ago now. And I looked at their code and I was like, you know, it's not exactly what we expect, but it shows that they have the ability to go and do stuff, and they're doing it off their own back. So they're setting themselves up for success within the future, because there's no expectation that anybody coming out of Coder Academy or any sort of course, or myself coming out of 3 years of uni, or the last job that you're at, that you're going to sit down and hit the ground running tomorrow at the new job. Like, it just doesn't work like that. You need to show like the principles and the core constructs of what you're doing. So I think like preparing and having a good portfolio is something that's really valuable for you.
Absolutely agree. Thank you for that. All right, I'll move on to Cynthia. So Cynthia, you've worked for a variety of organizations at various that are in various different sizes. How does the size of an organization impact the experience of being a DevOps engineer or someone working in DevOps?
So I have this hypothesis that in general, a startup needs to have kind of 5 or 8 developers before infrastructure is so messy that they want to hire someone to actually deal with it. But usually, and from then the infrastructure team kind of grows slowly with the rest. But I think the experience as an infrastructure, like a DevOps person in a small company, is similar to what you have any other role, that we have to wear a lot of different hats. You can't really specialize in one thing, because you have all these problems that need to be solved, and you have a very small amount of people to solve. So, for example, here I am currently the only infrastructure person. So I take care of CI, I take care of, people that can deploy things, I take care of logs, I take care of emails, I take care of everything. But the difference is that when you go to a much bigger company, people have to specialize, because small problems that for me is small, they become big problems as you scale. So in a big company, you're going to have someone that is specialized in taking care of the Kubernetes cluster. Or you have someone specialized in taking care of the Elasticsearch that serves all the logs. The least people that you have in a company, the more broad is going to be your role in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, how has your history in the various different roles you've had, the various different hats you've had to wear, how has that led you to your current position? And what other pathways have they maybe opened up for you?
So every company, and I think that's something that Bill said before, that I don't know if it was Bill or Paul, that every company that you end up is going to be slightly different, but depending on where they are looking for. So I work with things more related to CI, specializing in CI. I work with things that work all the way to it, pretty much like now that I have a really broad infrastructure level. And if I know, when you're in this kind of role, you're exposed to a lot of security. So security is just one step to the side, it's in there. So pretty much when you are on this kind of area, you have the ability to either focus on, I want to just create infrastructure and be kind of just take care of the base infrastructure, or I want to take care of the CI, or on small organizations, you can do all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Patrick. I'm a little conscious of time running out quickly for us. So Patrick, my first question for you is, how is the cloud transforming DevOps?
Made it a lot easier in some ways. One of the things that really changed is that the paradigm of how we manage our systems. So we're quite a few of us have talked about physically racking systems and cabling systems, and then we might set up automation on them, and then we have a drive failure, and then we have to build a new system, and we build it by hand, and then that system is not quite the same as the old system, or we have to expand, so we get another server, and again we build it by hand, and we start to get better at automation, but there was always something we'd miss every time. Clouds made it really easy to access both like compute resources like CPU and RAM, but also specialist resources like Elasticsearch or Kafka Bus or whatever tools you need for your thing, the same way we all experience electricity. I press a button and it works. And that's pretty much how it goes. And sometimes, very rarely, it doesn't work when I press the button, but it's incredibly rarely compared to when it was a server that I was responsible for. So it's just made it a lot easier, and it's moved the needle. So what we could automate before, and servers was a whole special, you had to know how to build servers and run servers and patch servers and manage Linux or Windows, and that was a whole specialty that a team had to have. So the development team over here didn't have any of it. With DevOps, you don't need to know all that server stuff, because Amazon or Azure or whoever you go with, they know how to do that. So you just throw your app onto their serverless offering or whatever it is, or you just restart a new server every month when you need to. And it really does make it easier. And it's made it easier for people to play. When I was starting my career, I owned one computer. And it was my gaming computer, so I had Windows installed on it, so I didn't learn anything with it. And then eventually I got enough money that I could get a second computer, and I installed Linux on it, and it was all good from then, actually. But now I can access 1,000 computers today without paying anything, just from free trials on various cloud accounts. I could spin up 10,000 images of a Docker image on different cloud providers within their free offering. So I can learn scale that I could never learn when I was sitting at home when I was 19 trying to figure this stuff out. I can play with firewalls and technology that I would never have had access to or would have had to have bought off eBay third hand and then explained to my wife why we needed three-phase power and why the house sounded like a 747 taking off when I turned on the Dell 4RU servers. It really has improved it across the board from an enterprise and a personal perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. My next question is, how important is a strong focus on DevOps for a startup, if it is important?
It depends what stage the startup's at and what they're doing. I think that when you're first starting with an idea, you don't want to spend too much time perfectly automating the delivery of that idea so you can repeat it every time, because you're going to change that idea probably 100 or 200 times before you figure out what it is you actually do as a startup. And as Cynthia was saying, you build up to a certain size where you go, you know what, we've got 8 developers, some of them have got a vague idea of what they're doing and some don't, and maybe we should have someone to take over this. It's something to be aware of. It's something to have in your head, as the phrase we throw around is technical debt. Debt is not a bad thing. I myself have a lot of debt because I've got a mortgage for a house in Sydney. But that's a trade-off I've decided to make. I could have had less debt and lived somewhere else. You will accrue technical debt as a startup. You will manually deploy your first workload into Amazon or start using Salesforce as your CRM and just set it up all wrong and have to fix it in 2 years' time. But that's okay. If you're still running your business in 2 years' time, that's a good problem to have. You're not going to get everything perfect, but it's absolutely important to just think of it as that. What are we going to get to? When does it make sense to automate something versus when it makes sense to do it manually? Because you know what, we're probably not going to do this again that often. Time is literally money, and when you're a startup and you probably don't have much, automation can take some time to get the first time. Saves a lot of time after it, but not the first time.
Yeah, that's been my experience of it too. We won't get into that. So my last question for you is, how does DevOps contribute to a strong culture within an organization?
It changes the way the different teams interact. So when it's really adopted across the board, it makes a huge difference to the way the teams work and the way they approach problems. The divide that used to be there of that, developers throwing over the wall to ops, and you'll find lots of memes about it on everywhere actually on the internet. It really was like that. But then again, in ops, there was all this divide of, there were the Windows and the Linux people and the security people and the storage people and the network people, and everybody would always point the finger at everybody else, and it was always someone else's fault. The correct answer is, it's always the network. Once that sort of divide went away and suddenly your team owned everything and you chose the network you're using. So if you've chosen to deploy your workload into AWS, you made that decision, and if it stops working, that's on you. You chose to deploy that workload into Alibaba because it's in China, and if that stops working, that's a decision you made, and that's on. So the ownership changes and where we lay the blame, which also means, as Bill said, don't be afraid to say we made a mistake. I've made many mistakes, and it's the first thing I'll own up to in any job interview. Hopefully, I've made enough mistakes that in my new job, I'll be able to help the new company avoid some of the old mistakes. But it's the ability to say that I made a mistake. And because you've done this, minimum viable product, and you can spin stuff up in the cloud and work in this fashion where you're making small changes a lot. Yeah, I've made mistakes, but you know what? I just rolled back my mistakes and we recovered usually fairly quickly. I've taken down production websites of fairly major Australian companies before. I've rebooted the wrong server for companies that I didn't realize I was on because I was doing too many things at once. I don't think, Paul looked a bit shocked there. I'm assuming he was looking at something else because I know he's done it too. Mistakes happen. And the difference is
everyone's done that.
Yeah. And yeah. I know people that have literally been fired because they made a mistake in a company. I won't name the company, but there was a large managed service provider who made a very serious error and took down a number of systems that affected an Australian airline and a couple of banks. And they blamed it all on a junior network engineer and fired them that day. So, they did the wrong thing. They didn't do the wrong thing. They did exactly what they were told to do. And they did it at 11 o'clock at night when they were tired, and they'd been at work since 9 a.m. that morning because they followed the process to do a change at 11 o'clock at night. And they did it manually because that's what the process required. And something went wrong. and they were too tired to see that something went wrong, and they went to sleep, and they didn't wake up when they were tried to be paged to go, hey, did you do this? No, it's not their fault. Absolutely not their fault. They didn't deserve to get fired. But that's the attitude some companies take. And again, it goes back to what questions you ask in the interview. I've had companies where they've literally given people employee of the month because they've stood up and said, I made a mistake today, and I'm owning that mistake. And yes, it cost us $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, but now we're correcting the mistake, because if I didn't stand up and say this, it would have cost us $1 million or $2 million or more.
That's one of the key outtakes there, Patrick. Like when I said earlier about like sharing that back, is like everybody will make mistakes all the time. Like what do you do to help prevent that in the future by not like laying on more, burdensome process? But what can we do like as a team to protect that, or how can we automate that manual piece away so that it is repeatable and reliable?
The only time making a mistake is bad is if you make the mistake and then run away. If you hang around and go, hey, look, I think I've messed up. What can I do to fix this? Can I help? Please help me. It's quicker to fix, it's cheaper to fix, and it gets done. But if you run off, you've then got somebody else who's got to come in, who's got to work out what's going on, what changed, what they need to do to fix it. The only time you never get punished is if you try and hide a mistake. If you learn from your mistake and move forward, it's a learning thing and it's good. If you make the mistake 3 or 4 times, you're a slow learner, and then we need to talk to you. But you should never get punished for making a mistake and trying to fix it the right way.
That's what people say, right? There are 2 types of people: those who already cause outages in production and those who will. So that's how it is. Outages just happen. Sometimes you're going to be the one holding the wheel. It's fine. Everyone will do.
Actually, literally today, I walked into the office of the CIO at UTS. I walked into his office and I was trying to solve a problem, and he was like, why is this taking so long? And I just had to say, look, it was my responsibility to do the thing that they were waiting for. I'm perfectly honest, I forgot about it. In all fairness, we didn't follow the process. There was no ticket, there was no reminders, there was no email. Nobody followed up on it. I just forgot that I had to do something. And they're all waiting there going, oh, Patrick said he'd do it. It'll be done. And I forgot. So for 2 weeks, nothing happened on this project because everyone was waiting for me to literally update 3 rows in a spreadsheet. But it doesn't matter. Like that mistake has now cost a significant amount of money. We've had to retain a team of contractors for longer than we should have. Like there's impacts. But I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, they should have used a ticket. It's because we didn't use a ticket. It was my fault. It was my job to remember that I had to do it. I got distracted. And he would rather that I did that than I said, oh, it was one of my team. I delegated it and they didn't do it. And it doesn't matter whether I delegated it or not. It's my team. It's my problem.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. That was awesome. Once again, that's it for the individual questions. I've just got a couple more questions to conclude. I'm going to open these up to anyone who wants to jump in or comment on whatever anyone else has said. So the first question to the panel is, one of the things that Coder Academy specializes in is onboarding career changes, and we help them make a shift into a career in tech. That's something that I'm very passionate about. What do you think that some of the advantages might be of having people with life experience or experience in other industries, particularly in moving into roles in DevOps?
I think it goes to what I was talking about earlier, which is we need that diversity of opinion and ideas, and there's no one true way to fix all of these things. So it really isn't about, like, you've got to learn the technology. Sure, you'll have to learn how to do some of these things, and I mean, again, I'm a manager of managers, and I have to learn how to do these things. But that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And you're going to bring a wealth of experience and knowledge that some of us will never have had an opportunity to have. I regularly get called in to meetings with people that are normally well outside my circle of influence, because I happen to spend some time living in China and Japan, and everyone's like, we need an expert opinion on this area, and somehow it becomes me. And I'm like, okay, sure. I'm sure the internet in China hasn't changed much in 15 years. Let's see what I can offer. But it's just, it really, it could be anything. And until you come in and say, hey, I've got this experience, and it doesn't have to be a job experience or a work experience, but it's that overall, the bigger picture. And too many places, you have a bunch of people who've all worked there for a very long time. So they're very set in their ways, because that's what we humans tend to do when we stay in one place for a long time, is we nest and we just build a comfortable shell, and that's what we do. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but if you want to be able to take advantage of a new thing, you need to be able to change, and sometimes that's scary. But yeah, I think absolutely just go for it. You've got a lot to offer, and I don't even know what you've got to offer, but I really look forward to finding out.
I do have 2 examples that I lived. That I had a person that came from engineer, like electrical engineer background, and he was the best incident management asset that I ever had in my career. He knew, like, from the straight go. I said, you know what, I don't need to coach you. I just tell you how it should be and you help me. There are a lot of different industries that already have the concept of how to deal with incidents a lot better than we actually already do in IT. And when they bring that to IT, it's great. It's like, yes, that is what, how to prevent manual errors, how to prevent the human error, or like the process that led to that. The second thing is that some people in some other industries, some previous experience, have a really good training on how to manage people, how to herd cats and get people to actually go into the same direction. That is something that is really great when people come with that, because a lot of people that came from like a very, a computer science, they kind of didn't understand how important that was for the roles. And we end up not having people with those type of skills that come a lot of times from the traditional background.
Yeah, I was just going to say to that, like, there is, there's technical depth, but then there's like domain depth as well. And so when, like AWS has this concept internally where we have like a technical field communities, and these technical field communities and technical, like it's the word that's used there, but it's like, you might be really, really good at CloudFormation, or you might be really, really good at like EC2 instances. And there's a community around that, like a vertical, but there are also like horizontals across a domain. And that domain might be, as Patrick said, having an idea of what it was like to live in China. Working in the real estate industry could be hugely valuable because of, the concepts that apply across it. If you're a motor mechanic or something like that, like you just don't know where these things become applicable to what you're doing within the role. So there's a lot of domain crossover there as well. And Patrick also touched on this like concept that if you stay somewhere for a long time, or you don't appreciate change. So it's not just staying somewhere for a long time, but if you become really set in your ways, it's like you become like I sort of call it like the beginner expert. Like you're so used to doing this one thing that you've considered yourself like an absolute expert in it. And it can be a dangerous place to find yourself, because you'll go and meet someone else, or you'll go for another role, you'll go for an interview at another company, and you'll have absolutely no idea, and you'll be a beginner all over again. So one, be careful about being stuck, not learning the new things that are coming off, but also be okay with not knowing exactly what's going on there, and being new and being fresh to that, and realizing that it is a role. Like our industry is an industry full of consistent learning and consistent change. Like everything we're doing today will be something very different in 3 to 5 years.
Absolutely, thank you. I might move on to the next question. So you've all worked in the industry for a while now. What would you suggest to people who may be experiencing imposter syndrome, and that's what's holding them back? What would you suggest as a way to overcome that imposter syndrome?
Develop confidence in yourself. If you're in a position and you're being paid to do it, and you do your job every day, you're not an imposter. You may not feel like you know as much as you think you do, and you probably, if you've got that imposter syndrome, you may be putting a lot of pressure on yourself. But then when you sit down and look around you, I can almost guarantee everybody that works with you or colleagues around you have some kind of doubt in the back of their mind about something. Like the IT world especially, everything moves so quick, it's not funny. Like 2 years ago, I installed Jenkins for a company, and that was the best thing since sliced bread. This year, if I went to say, hey, I'm going to whack Jenkins in, they'll go, yeah, that's great, but isn't it a bit old? You know, there's always something better coming along, so you're not ever going to know everything. So it's good to have a little bit of doubt, but don't ever think you're an imposter just because you don't know everything.
Absolutely.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
I always recommend people to build a community. That could be mentors, that could be meetups, that could be some peers. Doesn't need to be in the same company, could be in another companies. Join the Slack channels. But I think that DevOps and infrastructure has one thing that makes us very I think that makes it more humble than another place. That is, we are on call. Most of the time when we receive the freaking call, we have no idea what is happening. And we just get used to the idea that we have to discover that. And people know that they don't know things. You get to that, and it's going to be a mystery kind of exercise, mystery clue that you have to follow to understand what happened. And I really believe that people who go on call learn a lot about the system. Not only that, they experience the, I don't know, but that's okay. I'm going to find it out. And everyone, doesn't matter how senior they are going through the very same thing. So I do really enjoy that part on the infrastructure kind of roles, or the DevOps kind of roles.
I think one thing to keep in mind is that, I mean, as Bill said, we all feel that way sometimes. We all turn up to work and think, how on earth did I get this? Like, this is not my job. These are not my beautiful kids, if you happen to know that song. It really does sometimes feel like that. But also be aware that it may not be imposter syndrome. It may be something else. When Bill and I worked together a few years ago, I very much felt that it was imposter syndrome, but I wasn't meant to be doing the role. And then I actually went and talked to someone, and they said, no, it actually sounds like you might need to talk to your doctor. And I did. And it turned out I had anxiety, and I basically ended up having a panic attack at work, because there was a whole lot of stuff going on in my life. It was all sort of building up, and then the pressure of this job, and then it just kind of all came out. So if it's becoming crippling to you, and you're not, like, it's not just, oh, I don't think I'm good for that job, definitely apply for that job when you think you're not quite good enough. Go for it. But when it becomes, I don't think I can even do the job I'm meant to do, I'm not going to open my email because I don't know what to do, that's probably not imposter syndrome. That's probably time to go and talk to someone, and definitely do, because the longer you leave it, the much worse it is to come back from that, both professionally and mentally and physically. So check in with yourself and make sure, is it imposter syndrome? Because if it is, just keep applying for it. I've never applied for a job that I was 100% qualified for. And I know there's lots of research about the fact that men are more likely to do that than women. And I encourage every woman I know to just apply for every job that they have one of the buzzwords for. But I'm not saying I'm unqualified for jobs. I'm just saying on paper, it's really hard to be qualified for any job. There are job ads out there asking for 10 years of Kubernetes experience. That's nice. It was only released 6 years ago. Oh no, 7 years ago now. But it's literally impossible to have some of the things they ask for. Just submit your application, go and have a conversation with someone, and go from there.
Just following on from Patrick's point, if you apply for a job and you're not qualified for it, you'll get feedback from the interviewer, which will tell you what things you need to improve or which areas you could specialize in. But also, I'd like to raise the point, like, in IT traditionally is a very special mindset people sometimes, and we don't communicate very well. So it becomes very, very important to even if you work by yourself or in a team of one or something, talk to people around you. You don't have to do it every day, but also don't sit there and sweat yourself into a puddle because you don't know something. Talk. People may say, hey, I don't know, or hey, go talk to this person, but it's just sometimes it's the sound of your own voice, and somebody to bounce those ideas off will help you get rid of those doubts or lower your anxiety. You might be sitting there going, holy hell, I don't know how to fix this. And the person beside you goes, yeah, I had that last week here. This is what I did. And suddenly it's all fixed. But if you don't communicate and you don't have those channels open, you will be a basket case eventually. And that's not a benefit to you, definitely, and not a benefit to anybody else. I know personally, I would prefer to spend half a day talking to somebody and helping them get in the right headspace than knowing that they fell apart because they couldn't talk to anybody and they've now got to take stress leave or mental health leave or something. So, you know, I mean, working with Patrick, we were pretty good communication between us, and it helped a lot of the things. And everywhere I go, I make sure if it's not my team, I still want to talk to those people, and I still want to get through, you know, have that ability to say, hey, I've got a problem, or hey, what's happening here, or how are you going? It just makes things so much easier and so much refreshing and less stress to do that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
A lot of the times you'll find, well, I find that I'll, you know, like I'm pretty good. Like I learned pretty early to, you know, tap people on the shoulder, or, you know, call out to my friends or to my mates or whatever they might be, inside or outside the organization. But the moment you've gone and you've talked to someone and say, hey, I've got this problem, like, and they're like, all right, talk to me about it. You start talking to them about it. Like a lot of the time you can solve it just by like reiterating the problem back to somebody else. Like you see something that was completely blind to you. So, you know, that's like often a good way to do that. But like, you know, like Bill said, like having, and we said it earlier, so like having a mentor or having someone to go to, a community inside or outside the organization, is like super important. You know, like I talk to my friends all the time. Like I've got something here that I'm completely stuck with, and I can't figure it out. And they'll say, oh, but you work at AWS. And I said, yeah, but I mean, there's like hundreds of services there. Like we can't know it all inside out all of the time. We're not an expert all the time in everything. So you have to become like really comfortable at like asking for the help where it needs to be and not being worried about it. Like, I mean, we're like the people here on the panel, you can see like we're friendly, nice people. And we were like all just randomly picked through some connection somewhere. Like the industry is full of good people, right? So, you know, there's not people out there that are, you know, out to get you or looking to fire you if you make a mistake. I'll be honest, in my whole career, I've never come across somebody that's been, that a company has been so nasty or so, you know, you'll find tiny pockets of that, but it's, you know, vastly overwhelming with really great, helpful, friendly people that are willing to help people that are stuck, especially those that are like young and junior that are, you know, enthusiastic that want to come along.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it really goes to show, I mean, we've got 4 people here on a panel on 7:30 on a Thursday night, giving up their Thursday night to give back to the community. And that's fantastic. And I really appreciate everyone being here so much. It's been a really wonderful evening. But it is 7:30, so I think we should probably wrap it up. Dallas, did you have anything more to say?
No, that was really good and really informative. Thank you so much, everyone. Also, to be honest, we managed to sort of like answer the questions that sort of came through as we were going through. So we don't have any questions left over. I guess we'll give like just a couple of minutes for anyone to sort of just throw in some further questions. If you have been holding back, please go ahead and get your question in there right now so we can sort of answer it before we wrap it up in the next couple of minutes. I'll also actually throw in a link again. So that's where you can apply for our Code Cloud and Cyber Bootcamp, and also some contact information for myself and Brendan Browner. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I've got to say.
Thanks, Dallas.
Cool.
And once again, thanks everyone. Thanks to our panelists, and thanks everyone for joining tonight, all our attendees as well.
My pleasure.
I did see there is a question from Tim.
There was a question from Tim. It's a great question. I'd love to field that one if that's all right.
Go for it.
Tim asked, what is a good 5-year goal to aim for if you want to study hard in DevOps? I think I can speak for all of us when I say I have no idea what we'll be doing in 5 years. No idea. Your goal should be that you have a job that you love, that you're challenged and fulfilled and enjoy, and hopefully getting paid a lot of money for it. I don't know what things we'll be working with, or what cloud platforms will exist, or what the next 342,000 products that AWS are going to release are going to be called. You're going to have to find that out yourself. But I always treat career planning and about like orienteering. I have a 5-year rough direction of where I want to head. And if I'm off by 20 degrees either side, I don't care because that's how it works. But I generally move in the direction I want to go. And sometimes I have to go backwards to go forwards. I don't know how many people on the call have done orienteering before. It's basically going off into the bush with a compass and a general idea of where you're meant to end up and hoping you get there before you run out of water. So it can be challenging, and that's kind of what the career path is like. It's going to wind all over, and yeah, 5 years, that's way too far out. 5 months, maybe, but no, 5 years.
Yeah, I can't really agree with that anymore. Like, all of us here have pivoted our career at some point, and like I've done it like a couple of times already. You find areas that you're enthusiastic about, or you specialize in, or a domain that you really like, and you head over in that area. But for 5 years in DevOps, like 5 years ago, I mean, was DevOps even coined 5 years ago? Like, there's a specific time where the DevOps word was coined. I can't remember where it was.
I think it was at 2011, 2010, something like that. So it has like 12 years or 11 years, something like that. Yeah.
There's a specific instance where someone coined that term. Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be fundamentally different in 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, 5 years, right? Like 5 years in tech, where are we going to be, let alone specifically DevOps? But yeah.
The way things are going, 5 years from now will be strings and rocks and tin cans. Always again.
We're just going to a farm. That's it. We just computers were a mistake.
I hope in 5 years, Tim, you've managed to find some friends like I have on this panel.
All right. Well, yeah, Alex, should we wrap it up?
I think so.
Cool.
I think they're trying to kick me out of the building, so that's probably time.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And look, if you want to reach out to any of us, hopefully the panelists are okay if you sort of reach out to them on, say, like LinkedIn and other socials as well. But yeah, you can definitely do so with us too.
Yeah, myself included.
Cool.
Yeah, I encourage anybody who has any questions, feel free to email me or chat through LinkedIn. I'll answer anything.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I'll put my contact details up in that link as well. So if anybody wants to reach out, there's some interesting things there. Cynthia, maybe repaste that PyCon event because I wasn't quick enough to do it.
Oh, well, I actually have the PyCon, the blog post from the last year, so you can have a preview of how it's going to be. So yes, I'll post it again.
Cynthia, did you have to change your name to Katie to be allowed to host PyCon?
No, I am not part of the the Katie Conf. I'm just part of PyCon.
The last PyCon was organised by, I think, 3 Katies.
There is actually Katie Conf that is only for Katies.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end it now, guys. So thanks for coming. It's been fantastic to have you on Thursday night. And yeah, we'll see you around the traps.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.